Cyber is truly a joint warfare area.
Information warfare is it right now.
We're charged with making sure that the data that we produce and store internal to our networks stays safe. We're a target of everybody.
The threat is very real. It exists every single day, and that's something that our students quickly find out while they're going through training here. When the students first arrive here, we tell them, this is going to be hard. It might be the hardest thing you've ever done in your life.
JCAC is the Joint Cyber Analysis course. It was designed to bring somebody who's never worked with computers to an advanced user. It starts with the fundamentals of computers and computer architecture.
Last week, I was learning about defensive cyber operations.
Right now, I'm in Mod 12, and we're learning about wireless.
Next week, we're learning our classified mod, so not too much to talk about there.
Over the course of 6 months, we give them almost 2 full years of college in a computer science degree.
This culture of constant learning has developed a mindset that I didn't even know I had.
I like challenges. I personally feel like if I'm not being challenged in life, then what's the point of doing what I'm doing?
When students go to their next command, they're going to focus on one side or another. They're going to be on the offensive side, or they're going to be defending our network specifically.
Being a great cyber warrior is defined by someone who is not afraid to go out there, learn new things. Because the moment you stop learning is the moment you start falling behind.
To succeed as a cyber warrior, you have to be motivated, you have to be driven, and you have to be passionate about this field.
I'm just excited for the future. I can't wait to put everything into practice.
This experience has opened hundreds of paths. It's amazing what opportunities are available to us.
So for some of you folks, maybe who didn't get to hear the audio, that was a recruitment piece put together by the U.S. military, and it is an example of more than a trend, an initiative taking place globally right now as governments and national defense look to attract the attention and the talents of the next generation of cyber operator. So in this session today, what we're doing is we're, again, handing the mic to young folks to actually learn from leaders. And we're very, very fortunate today to have 3 incredibly accomplished cybersecurity leaders who share one commonality. They got not only their start in the cybersecurity industry, but honed their skills and their expertise while serving their country. They've also been able to translate that experience and expertise into second careers in industry and academia. So without further ado, we'll start this off by doing some introductions. Michael South is not only a good friend, but Michael joined AWS in 2017 as their the regional leader for the Americas for public sector security and compliance, and works with government, military, academia, not-for-profits from North to South America. Good day, Michael. Maybe in this kind of for 2 or 3 minutes, you can give our viewers a little bit of background in terms of your experience in the U.S. Navy and what that translated to in terms of next steps for your career.
Absolutely, and thank you for the introduction, Catherine. So just real quickly, I spent 25 years in the U.S. Navy. I enlisted right out of high school. Didn't really have a path to college at the time, and I started off doing avionics. I used to work on the electronic systems of the F-14 Tomcat. Found my way to IT, and I've held various roles within IT within the U.S. Navy. Finally made it to college, was commissioned as an officer, managed everything from satellite communications to all Navy networks and telecommunications in Europe, the regional lead for cybersecurity in Asia, the CIO for Japan, until I left the Navy, transitioned, and where I became the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO, for the city of Washington, D.C., which is where I learned about the cloud and developed those skills, and I now find myself at AWS helping our customers. Thank you.
So Irit Sandenberg, good evening from Tel Aviv. Irit is the head of service design for a quickly growing Tel Aviv-based company called Mitiga. Irit, there's some commonalities that you and I kind of pointed out for Zoe, and maybe you can give some of the viewers a background in terms of your military service and how that's translated to the work that you're doing now with Mitiga.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. So my background, I was recruited to the Army to a program that's called Havatzalot, which is a bit similar to the West Point structure in the US. We get the bachelor's degree combined with an officer's training. And then I served in several roles in intelligence. And in the middle of my service, I transitioned from strategic intelligence to cyber intelligence. And that was an opportunity to get into the field of cybersecurity. Later, after the military, my last role, my rank was major, and then I continued to be CEO of a small boutique company that did consultancy around endpoint security for several public sector clients. So it was an interesting transition from the public sector to the private sector, still working with public sector clients. And then I joined Mitiga about a year and a half ago to lead service design, which is around methodology and the way we do our services with our diverse clients. You're on mute.
I'm on mute. That's fantastic, because we're going to learn a lot more about not only your work and the work with Mitiga, but some of the things that you're seeing in the market as well. Eric Toller, I can't believe it's almost 3 years since you left a very highly successful career, 27-year career with the U.S. military and U.S. Army Cyber Command to become executive director of the Georgia Cyber Center. And for folks that haven't seen or read about the Georgia Cyber Center, a fantastic facility with great people that Eric leads. So Eric, maybe you can tell some of the viewers about your background, because you've had a very diverse background, very successful, and that's really translated well into some of the work that you're doing now with GCC.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Thanks for this opportunity to be here and be with this great group of panelists, and certainly those that are listening in, wanting to pursue a career in this field, and particularly in the military. Certainly has been my passion in life. So I was a career intelligence officer, really started off as a field artillery officer, but did 24 years as an intelligence officer, and really got into this thing called cyber as it evolved within the DoD, and got some pretty interesting opportunities along the way, to include writing the CONOP for the Army's first cyber unit, really focused more offensively. I got to do that in the Pentagon, and then I actually got to command that unit, which was called the Army's Network Warfare Battalion, back from 2010 to 12. Then I got to go on and lead an offensive cyber team for a U.S. Cyber Command as that command was standing up. So we were the first offensive cyber teams that were established to do operations against foreign adversaries in that space, which was obviously pretty exciting. And then from there, I went on and was the senior intelligence officer for the Cyber National Mission Force, which is a U.S. Cyber Command entity to help protect U.S. critical infrastructure. So again, we had both an offensive and a defensive mission there. And then my last kind of cyber-related job was commanding NSA Georgia, the National Security Agency Georgia. Primarily, we were focused on counterterrorism operations, but we did have a cybersecurity mission as well, and had integrated in Army Cyber Command and their joint functional or joint force command for cyber into our building and into our mission. So I've had a lot of cyber experience along the way, to include, worrying about the Russians back in the early days, to a lot of counterterrorism operations and 7 deployments. Trying to fight people off of our good country here. But wonderful experience that kind of led me to where I am now at the Georgia Cyber Center, which is actually part of Augusta University here in Augusta, Georgia. But we have been able to crack the nut on combining government and academia and private industry into an ecosystem that's doing some pretty cool things. So I'll stop there and get to the questions.
Well, we'll learn more about what's going on at GCC as we hand the mic over to our very enthusiastic young interviewers. So we have Zoe Martin. Zoe is an aspiring cybersecurity analyst, grad from Valdosta State University in Georgia. We also have Christian Holloway, who's a cybersecurity major at the University of Texas, San Antonio. So without further ado, Zoe, I'm going to hand the mic over to you.
Hi guys, I'm Zoe. I guess, are we starting with the questions? Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and start with the questions. So my first question is, why did you guys decide to do cybersecurity during your military service?
Good afternoon, Zoe. It's great to be here with you today, and I wish you the best of luck in your endeavors. For me, starting into cybersecurity or moving into cybersecurity, there's two aspects really. So one is kind of a natural fit, right? So when you look at law enforcement, military, when you start looking at defense and security, it's kind of a natural fit to start moving in that direction. And so that was, I guess it's just an inherent trait or interest for a lot of us. Within the military, though, at the time, I was doing more of your traditional IT work, so sysadmin, network engineering, but there's always a security component to that. And I was involved with a few different security events and initiatives. And so it kind of garnered my attention a little bit more. But the wonderful thing about the military is that we usually do 2 or 3 year rotations, and we kind of change jobs a little bit, slightly different as you move from one command to another. And so it wasn't until actually very late in my military career where there was a full-time cybersecurity opportunity for me. And that's when I went to Japan, and I became the lead for cybersecurity for the Navy forces in Asia. So it was kind of it wasn't exactly a straight path, and it was just something that I kind of found myself into, really. And then now I'm really passionate about it and continue to do it today.
Erin, can we hear your?
Yes, of course. So it's similar to what Michael mentioned, but I think that here in Israel, I mean, I joined the first role in the army. My role was intelligence, and my background was like in philosophy and history of the Middle East. And then I started working with a few cybersecurity units, and they were just too cool. So basically, I got an opportunity to work with really interesting and smart people. Some of them were hackers, and that was like too intriguing to not try to snoop around and see if there are interesting roles that I can go into. And then when I completed my first 2 roles, I had the opportunity to go and interview for one of them, and it was like, okay, I'm gonna do cool, interesting tech stuff. That's basically my first motivation. So that's the way the transition happened in the first place.
Mr. Toller, can we have your answer as well?
Yeah, sure. So we have to share a war story to get to where we are. So my transition is much less interesting than the previous 2. And it really was just being at a location at the right or wrong time, depending on your point of view. So I was literally, this is in 2006 in the Pentagon, I was working on the Army staff as the signals intelligence lead for the Army G2. My boss, the colonel, ran in at the time, and I was standing next to another major, and he said, okay, which one of you knows what IO stands for? And my friend goes immediately, Intel Oversight. And he's like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. And I said, Information Operations. And he goes, yes, come with me. And that was the first meeting where we were discussing breaking out computer network operations as a capability from underneath what we called the Information Operations umbrella. And so CNO, Computer Network Operations, then became Cyber Operations for the Army. And I became the cyber lead for the Army in the Army G2 at that point. And from there, it just kind of took off. But like Rit said earlier, you know, the transition from intelligence, or for me, signals intelligence, was really the core capability that we transitioned into cyber operations. That, along with our signal core, which was our IT and communications effort. So that was really where we grew the cyber capability within our forces.
Christian, do you want to ask the next question, please?
Well, yes. Thank you guys for those answers. You know, it's actually very interesting to hear about how you all came from such different backgrounds in the military, and then, you know, still came to this amazing industry. But now, obviously, you got to a point where you just aren't in public service anymore, and now you're in private sector. So how was that transition? Because obviously, you know, 2 totally different horses there. So, Mr. South, could you tell us about it?
Yeah, I think that's always kind of a little bit of an anxious adventure when you're moving from public sector to private sector. I was fortunate to have a bridge between the two, at least between the military and commercial. So from the military, because I was able to move to the city of Washington, D.C. as a civilian employee, as a public sector, I was able to bridge that a little bit. And it helped me understand, actually learned a few more things. Like I said, that was really when I started to learn more about the cloud and cloud security. But it also helped me understand that the divide between, the military and commercial, especially when you look at cybersecurity, is really not that wide, right? So we have the same type of threats, we have the same malware, we have the same, firewalls, and we attempt to have the same security objectives. And while the military has some unique threats and concerns, we tend to do things a lot the same way. And so having that bridge with DC coming over to the commercial side with AWS really helped me navigate that and feel better, kind of get a better sense for the fear of the unknown, or to tame the fear of the unknown. But that's how it worked out for me. And it was interesting listening to Eric's comments. I think we kind of date ourselves. I remember back in the day when there was no cyber. I remember when, chasing the Melissa virus around, starting off in those eras, and to have that transition now is really beneficial. And I think cybersecurity is one of those areas where there's a really good correlation between military, public sector, and commercial sector.
Awesome. Thank you. Yarit, would you please also provide your unique insight as well?
Yeah, sure. So my transition was in some ways gradual, in some ways very quick, because for many of the people in my program and also in similar military units, when we get to the end of our service as officers, we usually have this decision of, do we want to progress and grow in the Army until we're like 45 until retirement, or do we want to continue to something that is in the civilian private sector areas? And because that decision was pretty straightforward and easy for me, I just knew that I'm going to go into the more commercial areas just when I leave the Army. What I didn't plan was to find myself running a company that was a small services company that was founded by a few really talented tech experts with cybersecurity background that really wanted someone who has an operations and management background. And then we were handling these deals with public sector clients. And most of my concerns were actually around running the business. So it was like this smooth transition in terms of the professional aspect, but then learning on the fly how to run a small company and to get a small team to grow. So it was like that situation. And I think in terms of like the differences between the sectors, I had that opportunity to work with government offices and ministries and a few military clients and see their
I think we lost some audio with Irit. Eric, maybe while we see if we can get Irit back online, if you can possibly give your thoughts to that question.
Yeah, sure. First of all, Christian, for your information, coming from UTSA, we just hosted a group from what's called their National Security Collaboration Center on Monday, which is what we kind of call our digital twin in the San Antonio area. So you were well represented there from that. Yeah, so one caveat is I'm not actually in the private sector. I'm still in the state government, although I work with industry partners very closely, and all my friends are in industry. And I will tell you that my transition was relatively easy, only because I retired to take this job. So I was actually deployed in Afghanistan for my third one-year tour when this opportunity came open, and I actually applied on FaceTime, breaking up on the network there in Bagram, and somehow got accepted for this job. And then I submitted my retirement paperwork after that. But I will tell you that for those coming out of the military, it's not that smooth for many because we don't do a good job collectively in preparing our service members to transition. I think we've done a good job of teaching them how to do a resume and tie a tie and do an interview. But as far as job placement and jobs available, we have some work to do. And that's one of the tasks that we're doing here at the Georgia Cyber Center. So all my colleagues were not quite as fortunate as I was, but I'll reiterate what Michael and Eric were saying about the differences. I mean, there's, you say it's just like it, only different. I mean, there are a lot of similarities as far as overlap, but it is a different dynamic in government and being profit oriented in the private sector. Not that there aren't good people and working for God and country in the private sector, but it's just a different mentality when you're a for-profit entity.
Berit, do you want to finish your thought? I know we had a little bit of a computer glitch, but I thought maybe you could finish off some of your thoughts.
Yeah, my computer just crashed suddenly, so I'm not sure when I lost you. I think it was around saying that the dilemma and the main area of challenge was to understand how to operate the business aspects. Yeah, okay. And yeah, so basically that was like this gradual transition. And yes, and I think that the interesting part came even later when I started seeing the difference between public sector and private sector clients and their security needs and their capabilities and resources. So that's something we can dive into later.
Thank you all so much.
Zoe, you're up next.
Okay, so my next question was, how different was public sector versus private sector cyber? So I know you guys just talked about your transition, but now I'm kind of thinking more on the side of like your clients. So like your public sector clients versus your private sector clients.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. It drives a lot of motivation. So in the military and public sector in general, we focus a lot on mission. What's the mission? We have to support the mission. As Eric was commenting, we're not really for-profit oriented. Obviously, we have to keep costs low because we don't always have a lot of money in the government, but it's all about mission, getting the mission done. If you're lucky to go to a commercial company where they focus, say, on customers, like with Amazon, we have what we call customer obsession. It starts to translate that mission. So you're still getting some similarities there, or they're a little bit slightly different, right? And so when you start looking at organizational values and principles, that's one thing that I would say is if you're inherently drawn to public service, you kind of have that mindset for mission, contributing to the greater good, those type of things. You're going to want to look for companies on the private sector if and when you make that transition that will still align to those same type of principles. There are going to still be differences. Like in the military, we wore uniforms. In Amazon, we wear, you see developers wearing, shorts, flip flops, and T-shirts. And it's great, but it's really, the values are still very similar. The other thing that I found on private sector, though, is the speed at which things can get done, business can get done, technology can be brought on board. There's not as much, say, bureaucracy that hinders a lot of that. And with that, the talent, obviously with larger salaries, the talent pool is different. And I will tell you, this is the first time that I ever felt that, what we call imposter syndrome. And I've been at Amazon for about 3.5 years, and I still feel like the dumbest person in every room. And it can be interesting because when you are in an organization like the military for 25 years, or in Eric's case, 27 years, you start to develop that knowledge of the organization and the technology. And it's hard to be caught off guard in meetings because you are one of the smartest people in the room, and you go to the commercial sector, private sector, where oftentimes, they're dealing with more modern technologies, and you're learning every single day. So those are just some of the very few differences that I've experienced. But I tell you, I still miss the mission. As much as I enjoy Amazon, I still miss that mission and feeling like I'm contributing to the greater good.
Yeah, I can really understand like missing the drive and stuff behind, getting behind a mission, and then the imposter syndrome also. Hopefully we can get to that topic. But Eric, would you like to have your spiel on this question?
Yes, so actually it was really interesting to hear this answer now from Michael, because I think there are a few differences between the states and Israel in this case because of the mandatory military service. So actually here in cybersecurity and in offensive cyber as well, there's this ability to get to a huge talent pool of 18-year-olds and then build them to be amazing researchers, analysts, hackers, developers. And it's actually something that influences a lot of the way the resources are managed, because actually, even though the budget is technically limited, you feel like the resources are endless because it's like in the center of the occupation. And something that's interesting in Israel as well is because the threat, I think, is very real, and attacks are like actively happening all the time. And also because cybersecurity is a bit of a greenhouse for tech entrepreneurs, this is something the government invests a lot in. And then actually when I see private sector clients from the areas, I'll say, of enterprise security and not of security companies, I think that CISOs are more enablers and they're more limited. They have a budget that they have to manage much more carefully. They have less smaller teams, I think. So they have like these new constraints that in areas in the military, at least that I saw from up close, didn't really exist, or like they felt like they didn't exist. So that's an interesting difference that's maybe specific to Israel. But yes, I think that this aspect of the trade-off of like the mission and also the efficiency that you get to when you're focused on business goals is something that people should be aware of when they're considering their careers.
And Mr. Toller?
Yeah, so I had a little bit different experience near the end of my career than Michael there. I always felt like I was the dumbest guy in the room, even as the senior leader. And what I like to say is I became very comfortable at being uncomfortable. And going back to that transition, it's kind of the same thing. Like, you're learning I have to learn now the University System of Georgia bureaucracies and policies. I got to learn the state of Georgia and all the new things that go with the job. But fundamentally, things are the same. And the last thing I'll add on the difference, and I think Michael nailed it with the difference in talent management that we do, at least in the US. Generally speaking, it's much better in the private sector when it comes to being able to hire people at higher salaries and getting extremely talented people from a much wider swath of people that you would otherwise. I mean, the military, I think, does a pretty good job, but it's limited on the pool that you can even come in because of the physical and no criminal background. I mean, there's a lot more constraints that you have as far as hiring people into the military and managing that talent. At the same time, it's a lot easier to drop dead weight in the private sector. The military does a pretty good job, but if you're in another public sector, once you hire someone, it's hard to get rid of them. The private sector doesn't have as much problem with that. They can let someone go and bring in the next talented person. And I will tell you, what Michael said is absolutely correct when they say industry moves faster, and Amazon may be the exception to the rule, but what I've found is that the larger the company, the slower they move. And in some cases, some of our companies that are here in the building that are the multi-billion-dollar companies, in some cases move slower than the military. So you just have to take that with a grain of salt. But if you're a startup, man, you can move quick because you have to, because it's about survival at that point. But I think, yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you, all of you. It's really interesting to hear about the differences between the two, because I guess we all think of it as cybersecurity as a whole, so it's kind of hard to visualize the differences between the two sectors. So this next topic, Eric actually got onto it a little bit earlier, and I think Michael kind of touched on it too with regards to the mission. Do you feel that your public sector service, when you were leaving, did they prepare you to let go of the mission? Did they prepare you for private sector work?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I think when you look at the type of work, I found that the military prepared me exceptionally well for moving over. one, I started off in IT, and not to say you have to start off in IT to go into cybersecurity, but having that foundation does provide a lot of benefits. When you start to look at cybersecurity overall, you already understand the underlying technology. So there are benefits to that. The other thing is that when you come from the public sector and you're used to that mission priority and focus, you get to the point where you understand that your role is not to tinker with the greatest tech. Your role is to support that mission. And I think that, sometimes, technologists, we can forget that and we become what we call self-licking ice cream cones, where we start getting wrapped around the axle of doing things for ourselves and our own technology, and forget that the purpose for technology is to support some business or mission end. And so having that mission focus really helped me. Understanding how to build a programmatic, outlay of work, implement programs and manage that technology through those means really helped me quite a bit. Because I sometimes see on the private sector, people can flail a little bit. There's sometimes a little bit too reactive. They haven't led the foundation. So I think that really helped me quite a bit. Where I didn't help me, and where I had a steep learning curve, is really on the commercial business side, right? Understanding how sales works and business development, the change in priorities, what is capture and proposals, and there's a lot of those business aspects, especially on the sales, that I wasn't prepared for, that I had to ramp up really quickly and understand, because that's now the new business, that's now the new mission. So I think overall, yes, I think it prepared me very well. And then it's just a matter of understanding where you can translate that over and apply it, and where you need to leave it at the door and learn and do something new.
Awesome. Thank you. It's very, sorry. It's very insightful to hear these from, people who've been doing this for a long time and have had these experiences. Edward, would you please continue on the same line of thought?
Yes, sure. So apart from, I really agree with what Michael said about this ability to think more long-term and plan a program or a project, which is something that you really develop, I think, in the military especially, but in the public sector in general. But maybe two more aspects. I think that the network aspect is a really strong area where it prepares you, because especially here, I think that what we find is people who serve in the same units, or they work in the same offices and then continue, and they become this part of an ecosystem. And the relationships you build within the military, at least, are somehow, I think, more intense because of the setting and the way you're working with people, especially around operations. So that's something that is surprisingly important later on. And then also the technical aspect, I think that's something that I found in the military a lot, is this approach that everything is possible, and we'll find the ability to build or get into or infiltrate or exfiltrate whatever we need. So I think that's something that it builds a lot of confidence. Like sometimes maybe even private sector challenges seem smaller in comparison, but that's from my experience.
Awesome. Thank you. Eric, same question.
Yeah, what to add? I do want to go back and talk about Israel's talent. I was fortunate to work very closely with some of your operators and analysts there in Israel. And for the Georgia Cyber Center, our model for what we stood up is actually there in Beersheba. Was kind of what we modeled. So, but I just wanted to, before I forget, comment on your talent. It was amazing to see those 18, 19, 20-year-olds and how much skills they had in this career field. But the other thing I'll mention for this topic is the leadership experience is invaluable. As Michael said, the ability to do program management, critical thinking and problem solving skills. I mean, here it nailed that. We'll get this thing done regardless, even with minimal resources. Communication skills, the networking skills, and then kind of strategy development, the ability to think, several years down the road as opposed to just what I'm going to do this coming year. And the Army, at least for me, did provide exceptional technical training and experience. I kind of wish I would have had more IT experience. I was always trying to catch up with that, being an Intel analyst, looking at networks from the other side. But for those that are in that, it's an easy translation over into the cybersecurity field.
And if you don't mind, I'd like to add actually one thing that I forgot, which I think is very pertinent to this audience is we talked about those talent pools. This is if you're a hiring manager, but what if, like for Zoe and for Christian, you're trying to become that talent pool, and it can be kind of heartbreaking when you look at all the job opportunities out there and it's entry level, but yet they want 10 years of experience and 5 certifications. And you're like, well, wait a minute, it's supposed to be entry level. The one thing that the public service, the public sector, and especially the military provides is that training path, right? So you can go in right out of high school or right out of college, and the military will train you, and you're going to get the experience. And when you get out, you're going to have that training, that experience, rank, leadership experience at a very young age. And so this is probably one of the best opportunities for young people to get into an area where you can actually develop those skills and enter the workforce very quickly. And then afterwards, be very marketable afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. It's a huge thing. A lot of my peers feel that, and I personally feel that. So thank you very much. Zoe, I'm gonna turn it over back to you.
Yeah, so thank you for saying that. Like, you don't understand, like, it's been such a struggle finding like entry-level jobs. And like, you wait this, and this. But yeah, anyway, next question is, how do you see the needs of cybersecurity as a whole evolving into the future?
Yeah, so this is something that I really wasn't expecting when I joined AWS. But my experience is that on cybersecurity, there's not a lot of developers, right? We're generally engineers and operators and analysts. You'll see developers more on the, say, malware reverse engineering and some other areas, but we're seeing a couple of changes. So one is, especially when you start looking at cloud and the migration to cloud, we're looking at infrastructure as code, where we're moving away from physical servers and physical appliances, and everything is becoming virtualized and defined by code. And so I think this is something, especially in cybersecurity, we have to start developing early, is getting those coding skills, right? So my experience is you generally have a group of people that are developers, and there's stereotypes around the personalities that exist with developers versus the stereotype of personalities that exist around IT operators. And the reality is that those are merging as you're looking at DevOps as a new concept, a way of doing business, and the fact that everything is becoming code. What I see in cybersecurity is that we've got to start building those skill sets now, get the coders in so they understand how that works. You start looking at how the CI/CD pipeline is protected and moving forward, being able to implement version control. You're not just putting protection, but you're actually putting version control on those protections. And so I think that's one of the things, the biggest things that I'm seeing at a baseline for all. And of course, from my particular perspective at AWS, the fact that the cloud to me is the next thing, right? So we went from mainframes to distributed, servers and clients to now we're moving to the cloud, and that's going to be the next biggest disruptor. And so as you start looking at that, building those cloud security skills, and believe it or not, the cloud is not just somebody else's data center somewhere else. There's a whole lot more to it. So just really building those skill sets are what I see the future coming around cybersecurity. I guess I'll stop there.
Thank you. It's rather interesting because I think still a lot of people just kind of envision the cloud to be something that exists somewhere out there on a Linux server. But it is interesting to hear that it is still growing and evolving and still changing. Edith, would you please give us your perspective?
Yes, so my perspective is a lot from the prism of what I see at Mediga. So what we're focused on is incident readiness and response, specifically for cloud and hybrid cloud environments. And then I think that one of the interesting ways we approach, or the things we see with clients, is this transition from the thought of cybersecurity as like a checklist of solutions to a more holistic approach. And then the question of how do you build an anti-fragile organization? How do you prepare for an incident? Because that's like your target. That's the thing you want to avoid at all costs, especially now that we're seeing how cyber incidents can influence and harm organizations and companies. So I think this aspect of building readiness and looking at the problem of cybersecurity holistically is something that is in a transition and is a growing concept, or among our clients at least. And then when it comes to talent, it's something that's really related. I think that both in cloud and cloud forensics, the ability to face not only the new technology, but also the pace of change within tech adoption is something that will need a lot more focus in the cybersecurity professional community. And then there's the aspect of building a diverse integrated skill set. So I think that in incident response, we just feel it a lot because it's not enough to solve the technical problem. You need to be able to understand something that is just broader in terms of your entire strategy, all of the potential gaps, and not only like the specific remediation, specific solution to the way the attacker entered in the last time. So this combination of learning how to learn new skills all the time and integrating the softer and the harder technological skills, I think that they're combining with like this more holistic approach to cybersecurity in general.
Yeah, I think you're constantly learning too in this field. But I just want to put in a quick question for Mr. South. As far as like programming languages that you see, like I know my background is in Java and I know Python is popular for machine learning. What kind of languages are you seeing as far as the future? And then we can go in with Mr. Toller's answer.
Yeah, so right now, the biggest thing that I'm seeing is Python. Especially around big data and cybersecurity, but then, Java. Really, I think the important thing, especially when you're young looking at this, is look at whatever language is best for what you want to build or do. And once you start developing those skills of how to learn languages and how they work, it's easier to start picking up new languages. So that helps.
Okay, Mr. Toller, I'm sorry. Or if you would like to answer.
You said that this question was interesting. This is your question, sir.
Yeah, so when we, there's lots of definitions of cyber out there. One of our simple definitions is really just where people, processes, and technology collide together in the information environment. And so I'll really look at it from those three perspectives. So from the people perspective, and the good news for you, hopefully sooner rather than later, is the requirements are going to continue to grow for cybersecurity professionals. Right now, we've actually got talent available that can fill some of those, but our HR processes have not caught up with that. But that's going to get resolved. It's going to have to, or we're just going to collapse on ourselves. So I think that's going to get sorted out. But those requirements are going to continue to grow because the threat is going to continue to grow. I think from a technology perspective, Michael kind of talked about the moving to the cloud. I think with that consolidation of services and data, you've also got consolidations of security services, where that's monitoring, incident response. And if you look across the landscape right now, we've got a kind of a divide between the haves and the have-nots. Some people just can't physically afford to secure themselves right now, whether you're a small business or a local government. And so we've got to solve that problem. And again, I think we'll get that done. And then from processes and kind of policy, I think you're going to see a continued merging of private and public sector capabilities. Again, if we don't do that, we're going to be at tremendous risk against some of those nation states that are really doing us harm right now, either through industrial espionage or through the financial sector, or potentially through destructive attacks in the future. And so that has to happen. And there's a lot of efforts ongoing, but again, we're just one incident away from really changing the paradigm of how we do that. So I'm pretty confident we'll get that done.
Erin, I think you wanted to put in some input as far as the programming languages.
Yes, so it's just to add that on top of coding and programming languages, I think that data manipulation is a really important area to focus on. Working with the SQL, with Splunk, building the right queries, some basic knowledge in data science, data analysis. I think those areas really create stronger analysts and researchers. And that's something we're facing a lot in Mediga. So I'd recommend that as well.
Yeah, I would +1 that big time.
Christian?
All right, so this is the big one. Why should we, or other people watching this later, consider a career in public service? Some of the first thing that we think about when joining the military is, or well, some people may think is, oh, uniforms, oh, somebody's telling me what to do, uh, or something to that effect. So why should we do it?
Well, I think we kind of touched on it. It really comes down to, in my mind, two primary reasons. One is the mission, right? You have a sense that you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself, make a dent in the world for the better, right? And so I think that's one. The second thing, and we hit on this too, is the fact that the public sector, and especially the military, gives you an opportunity to enter the cybersecurity workforce with really no skills, no training, no education about it, and get training and get experience within that field. And then, like what Eric was talking about earlier, it's the private sector, other than very few organizations and people, do not get the opportunity to perform offensive cyber operations, where the military or select intelligence communities are able to do that. So the type of experience that you get there, and then of course, I'm the Navy, so right, so it's not just a job; it's an adventure. I've been over to 40 different countries, lived in 3 different countries, and the experiences you just can't get anywhere else, whether you do a few years or a whole career. And so those were the primary reasons that I would say. But to your point, to those who are like, well, I don't want to go to the military, somebody's going to tell me what to do. Well, I hate to tell you this, but everybody has a boss. Uniforms, you know what? They can look pretty good, and it makes it real easy deciding what you're going to wear, every day. The downside is when you finally leave the military and you're someone like me, you struggle with how to put together your ensemble for the day and what to wear. But and it's just, I think that overall, and like with Israel, where everybody's required to go through the military and have military service, the sense of camaraderie that you get. I mean, we've all seen the TV shows and the movies, and it's real. You're going to develop bonds with people stronger than you will anywhere else in your life. And so there's a lot of things to the military and public service that you can't get anywhere else, and that can help kickstart your cybersecurity career. So I guess I'll stop there for now.
Thank you for hitting on a lot of those points. My father was in the service too, so I totally 100% get the bonds, and he did complain about the uniforms a little bit. So Eric, they do have mandatory service in Israel. So maybe why would people be optimistic to do public sector service?
So I'll say that first, I really agree with all of the great points Michael brought up. I think that 2 points that I'll add and are about optimism. One is for cyber defenders, another one is for offensive cyber. So for defenders, I mean, the APTs you get to see are real and are tough. And it's a huge and interesting challenge. It's not like tiny breaches, financial motivations. It's sometimes government actors, crazy work within networks, and that's very cool. Or at least you prepare for that, and that also builds a lot of the skill. And for those who do offensive cyber, that's also something that has, there's nothing parallel to it, I think. The way you need to develop the thought, the process, the way to get to the goal, it's something that builds a whole new skill set that actually I can't really imagine anywhere in the private sector where you can develop those skill sets. And that's on top of the training aspects and the camaraderie and all of that. So those are my 2 main points.
I guess it's so cool to hear. Well, okay, maybe not cool, but to hear about major cyber attacks, because usually when we hear about them, we just read about them on the news. It's like, oh, Facebook got hacked again, got to change my password. But that whole paradigm changes when, nation states. Scary.
And the big ones don't get published. So I think that's the main bias that we have when we see it only on the news, because like the really juicy things are happening completely behind the scenes and behind censorship.
All right, no need to scare me. Eric, would you please chime in on this?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to go back to that point, a lot of these criminal organizations that are out there with these ransom attacks are either directly associated with nation states or at least sponsored or sanctioned by nation states. So one of the things I used to do is track individuals, and you'd see one guy working for the third PLA during the day and then doing, freelancing at night as a criminal, exploiting our infrastructure and doing ransomware attacks. So, I mean, it's a pretty serious thing. But back to the question, number one, your country needs you. Did you hear that? Your country needs you. That's why you should want to do it. Just to borrow real quickly, not to offend anybody, but from scripture in Isaiah, it says, "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And I said, here I am, send me." So if not you, then who? Somebody's got to protect us. Second thing is job satisfaction. I think we alluded to that earlier, but I will tell you, of all my peers, all of the people that were my bosses, for my subordinates that are out of the Army, I have not had a single person come back to me and say they're enjoying their experience now more than they did in the service. Now, those that got out because they wasn't the right fit, but for those that went through the distance, right, and retired, they make more money now, but the job satisfaction is hard to compare. Now, there's exceptions to that, obviously, but I will tell you that's it. And then the last thing is the training and experience that you get in the military is second to none. It will prepare you for anything beyond the military. So whether you serve 2 years, 4 years, or 30 years, I think it will be invaluable experience for you. And I truly, truly believe that. And even if you serve as a civilian, what's interesting about civilian service in the US is our DoD civilians take the exact same oath of office that I took as a commissioned officer in the Army, word for word, to swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and it keeps going. So whether you're in uniform or not, you're serving your country. And when you're in this career field, it doesn't matter whether you're in the public or the private sector, you're serving your country. So just keep that in mind as you progress through this. And so whatever path you choose, I just hope that you stay in the field, because we need you in the field. Because if you're working for a bank, you're protecting our critical infrastructure. If you're working at Georgia Power, you're protecting our critical infrastructure, and I can go on and on. So hopefully you make a good choice, and I just wish you the best in your future endeavors.
If I could pull a thread on something Eric commented on. So we talked a lot about the military because of the three panelists that are here, but like Eric said, the military isn't necessarily for everyone, right? But there's still a broad range of public sector and the civilian side, from federal government to state, local government, city government. Christian, you and I talked a little bit about the FBI or local law enforcement. There's a lot out there. So even if you don't want to wear a uniform, you don't want to go to boot camp or officer candidate school, there are still a lot of opportunities in the public sector as a civilian that you can still, look into. They have entry level as well, and they can help you out there.
Fantastic. Because, a very quick question that I'm going to have for Zoe and Christian, and Christian, I'll start with you. You've had an opportunity to meet these three incredible leaders. Has anything changed in terms of your perspective on the industry, on public service from an hour ago?
I mean, how could it not? When you're hearing about perspectives from behind the scenes from, amazing individuals who've been doing this for far longer than I have, and I've been able to see a lot more. You get to feel or experience secondhand what they've experienced through their words, and I their insight has been valuable or invaluable to me so far. And I would like to follow up with all of you if I can later on about more, if that's okay.
Well, you and Zoe have done such a great job hosting this. You guys have a lot more work to do on this, so you're not going anywhere. Zoe, your thoughts?
Oh yeah, so yeah, it's been really great to hear everything, especially what Mr. Toller was saying about public sector civilian. I've actually been looking into NSA, FBI. Those have been like my top places to work because I do want to be a part of something that's bigger than me. I do want to defend the country against cybercrime. That's why I got into cybersecurity. So huge, huge thank you to you guys for your service. But yeah, as far as my change, no, it just fired me up to keep going, keep putting in applications, and keep fighting.
Well, that's fantastic. So, to Irit, thank you. It's later in the evening for you. To Eric and Michael, thank you so much. The commonality again for all three of you that are extremely busy is the fact that you are willing to give of your time and your insights. And that's so important if we're going to get the next generation intrigued about coming into this industry. So thank you so much for your time. And it's been a pleasure.